reality, it's been.
And then there's probably not going to be anywhere near this kind of money.
Hey, everyone, we're going to get started in a minute. So if I could wrap up chat, find your seats. Committee members, Jenny's going to be passing out some documents related to this meeting.
Public comment.
And we'll open the meeting in just a few moments.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just let me know when you're ready. Just another minute and we'll get started. All right, let's see. Everybody ready? Time being 10:33 a.m. on October 6, 2021. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the American Rescue Plan Committee of Kane County. I am Committee Chair Jared Sanchez. Clerk, please call the roll.
Bates,
Bates here.
Brown,
Brown here.
Franz,
Here.
Gums,
Comes here.
Yeah, I think she said here.
Yes,
Did you
I'm
say
here.
Okay.
You're here.
thank you. Kenyon,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Martin,
Martin present.
Molina,
Molina present.
Strothman,
Strathman here.
Tepe,
Happy here.
and Sanchez.
Here. All right, and I have been informed by Commissioner Board Member Caius that it is Happy National Noodle Day. So for all you pasta lovers out there, got something to celebrate today.
It's ironically National Mad Hatter Day today too.
I like that one. All right, we don't have minutes to approve at this meeting. I will ask for public comments on agenda and non-agenda items. I do have some speakers who are signed up, so I will call upon them first. Okay, do we have a Janine Kanageiser? I don't know how to pronounce the name, so I apologize if I butchered it. Janine from Northern Illinois Food Bank on the call. Okay, I'll circle back. Do we have Mike Cobb? Is there a Mike Cobb here in the audience or online? Like to deliver a public comment? All right. Beth Foster, Anderson Animal Shelter. Beth is here. Okay, got a winner.
Got a winner.
Just state your
Time's
name
a charm.
and your organization, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Beth Foster, and I am the CEO of Anderson Animal Shelter. We've now started using the name Anderson Humane. So we have been serving the Kane County area and really all the surrounding communities for 54 years. And we have been a place where people can bring their pets if they can't keep them any longer. We've also been a refuge for homeless pets. Last year, coincidentally, 2 weeks after, or before, I should say, that we closed because of COVID, we merged with Fox Valley Wildlife Center, which means that we introduced the care of an additional 3,000 animals, in this case, wild animals, orphaned and injured wild animals. So we employ over 100 staff. We have 6 locations, 3 of which are adoption centers. And we have a vet clinic in South Elgin. Our main center is in South Elgin, and we have a wildlife center in Elburn. We are now one of the largest animal welfare organizations in the state of Illinois. In 2017, we expanded our mission so that we no longer just care for animals and focus on animal welfare. We also focus on the positive effect that animals have on people. So a lot of the programs that we've been launching over the last several years are programs that are aimed at improving the emotional health of people through animals. We also offer a variety of educational programs that serve mostly school-age children, but we're expanding our programs to include adults as well. When COVID hit last year, as I said, we had just merged with Fox Valley Wildlife Center, and it had a pretty significant effect on our organization. We were just launching what we refer to in our business as baby season, which means that we can receive up to over 100 orphaned or injured wild babies every day during the months of April through June. We also have baby season on the pet side. So that was a really busy time for us right as COVID was hitting. We made the choice, unlike a lot of organizations, philosophically not to lay off any of our staff. And yet our public programs had to be closed because of the shelter at home order. So the public programs that we offer, mostly our adoption program, our humane education program, cumulatively provide about 50% of our revenue every year. So for about 6 weeks last year, we received no revenue from our major programs, which was a major hit for us because our expenses stayed the same. Our payroll was the same. We still had 400 pets in our care at the time that we shut down, plus our wildlife center. We were able to switch the format of our education programs from in-person to virtual, but there's some question about the effectiveness of virtual education programs. So we, as an organization, were financially affected for sure.
Ma'am, if you could
Yep.
wrap up.
Almost done.
Thank you.
I'm really close. We were financially affected for sure, but we also were affected from a program standpoint. We were not able to provide the services that we normally do. So we are confident that we'll make it, that we're not an organization that's going to fail because of COVID, but we are also recognizing that we're not all the way through COVID. There are still effects that are happening.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I believe we have Shannon Cameron was going to postpone her comments until tomorrow evening's listening session. Shannon, if that is not the case, say so now. Otherwise, we'll hear from you tomorrow. Okay. Under Chairman's comments, I don't really have any comments. There's enough to talk about here today, so let's just get to it. I will say though, Mr. Fraz is going to have to leave us at a certain point, so I may move up the resolution we have on the agenda so that we can have that discussion with full committee.
Hi, I'm here to make some comments, but it's about a township, so should I do that
Oh,
now?
sure. Yes, please. Yes. Before we move on. Just state your name, the organization you're with, and I'll give you 3 minutes.
Sure. Katie Meyer with Dundee Township. I'm the Social Services and Open Space Manager. Anderson's a very, very important resource for our community and the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. I'm here on behalf of the residents of Dundee Township who acquire assistance. At Dundee Township, we do have an emergency assistance program. Townships aren't required to have those, but our township does have one. And last year, our board voted to cut it from $75,000 to $20,000. Because the moratorium was recently lifted, we're about halfway through those funds already. We're not going to make it through the end of the year. Those go to prevent utility disconnections or bringing utilities back on and preventing evictions. And I know the COVID CARES money went out. Unfortunately, personally, I don't agree how those monies were handed out. I wish the money Dundee Township at least received would have went towards assisting people with their financial needs, and it didn't. I recently met with McHenry County, and what they did was they set up a program with the county so the township residents would be referred to the county to get assistance with those bills. Also, it seems they have a lot more resources when it comes to social services than King County has. So when I get people calling the office every day, for instance, a mother with 3 little kids under the age of 4 who's about to be evicted, whose electricity has been turned off, and there's nothing else I can do for her. And PADS homeless shelter is sometimes booked, and the crisis center is sometimes booked, and sometimes people don't even get a phone call back from them. And I have nothing else to tell them, but I'm sorry. I called the King County Sheriff's Office yesterday to ask, are there discussions going on about this situation? I'm afraid there's going to be a big influx in homeless people. What are we going to do about them? And I was told, sorry, nobody's talking about that yet right now. But maybe if you'd like to meet with us, we can start. I know you have money to give out to help people, to help the residents of King County, and I hope some can be directed towards these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on to our discussion items. First being the reporting update. For those who are at executive committee, you may be aware that the deadline for our next report was extended until January 31st, 2022. So we have paused work on producing that report, and we'll be determining who will complete that report as we go along. Any questions on that section? Okay. Expenditure and allocation of funds to date. So Jenny handed out to you all some papers. One of those being a chart that Peter produced, Peter Phillips, our program manager, that shows the allocations and expenditures to date. So let me pull it up on the screen so that those who don't have the copy can see it.
You have more copies, Jenny? You want a copy? For Mr. Caius? So he doesn't have to look over my shoulder. Thank you.
One moment, please.
Yeah, I've got one. Do you?
Oh, I thought you were talking about you.
Never mind, sorry.
Okay, so somewhat of a self-explanatory worksheet. And this is just the first iteration of it. It will change as we go along. It'll probably be formatted somewhat differently, at least stylistically, but this has all the information that we have to date. Working with ONZIC, we're still waiting to get direct access to the ledgers and things that we need, but we're pretty sure these numbers are quite accurate. So you can see the total funds available and the things that we have in the various expenditure categories. Revenue recoupment fund, you'll notice under here that number in parentheses. So that's how much we've spent meaning we've overspent in that fund. I haven't had a chance to speak with Mr. Onzik on this, but I'm assuming the idea is that at the end of our fiscal year this year, we're going to get more revenue recoupment money that will be put into this fund. And so then this will be made whole. So it's still money that's coming from the ARPA fund directly. There's nothing wrong with doing it this way. It's just kind of a technicality of our record keeping. So you'll notice that kind of negative figure there. But otherwise, that is that's what we have to date. I'll scroll down a little bit so you can see some of the numbers for the mass vax fund and contact tracing. Ms. Bates, you have a question?
I thought we had taken like $20 million out of this for first responder payment for last year, something like that,
$20 million?
uh-huh.
No.
So is this number, well, good. I thought we were down to like 73 million that we could spend because of the first responder reimburse.
Those were projected numbers, I think you might be referring to, that Mr. Onzik showed us, the breakdown for payroll.
Yeah.
So we can't reimburse our payroll yet for 2021 until the end of our fiscal year.
Okay,
So I'm assuming in December or January at the latest, there will be a resolution coming before this committee to reimburse all eligible payroll. And I think it was somewhere in the ballpark of like $11 million or something like that. So it could be what you're referring
so
to.
it might be coming, but it
The
hasn't.
total
happened
of all the
already.
projections was, I think, $21 million.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's just Onzik projecting ahead.
Okay,
But we have to wait for the final numbers at the end of the year.
okay,
And then that money, the payroll reimbursement money, will go into the COVID savings reserve fund that we have. That currently already has some money from the CARES Act.
all right. Thank
That's
you.
my understanding, at least. Is that correct, Vince and Michelle? The payroll reimbursement will go into the special savings fund?
Yeah, you would have to wait until the end of the fiscal year, and then any revenue replacement that this committee and then the county board wants to approve would have to be by new resolution to go into that revenue recoupment fund that Joe Onzik has set up. Answer your question.
Yes, Assistant State's Attorney Vince Coyle, just for the audio record.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering on the summary of expenses and different allocations under administrative costs, 10% of total.
Mhm.
What does that comprise?
That's simply just that $10.3 million figure is just simply what 10% of the total ARPA fund is or could be. That, and then the 53,809, that is a resolution that's working its way up to the county board right now for known administrative expenses that we've had.
So it's a budgeted allocation that hasn't been expended yet.
I don't even know that we've budgeted the 10.3 million. Is that what you're referring to, or the 53,000?
I'm talking about the 10.
Yeah,
points.
that's just what 10% of the total is. So that's the total
Just use
allowable
that
number.
number for the heck of it.
Yeah, it's just so we know that's what 10%. I would hope that we spend well under that in administrative expenses in the life of this program.
So with respect to the different allocations that have been made already from the ARPA money, it looks like we're probably at a point where we're around 88 million remaining. Would that sound reasonably accurate?
I can't do that kind of math off the top of my head like you can, Mr. Leonard, but
Well,
somewhere around
it's no
there.
problem.
Yeah.
I'm just, I guess what I'm trying to do is define what we have to actually allocate internally and externally. So, we'll get to that point.
I know where you get that number.
yeah, those numbers didn't make it on this worksheet. It came down to the last minute just because having some issues with accessing various
I think it's less
numbers.
than that.
I think it's less than that. So it should be
About
95,
84, 85.
80, yes, 84.
Actually, it's even less than that because you've
Less
got the
than that.
mass vaccination fund too.
So
I think if you add up all these numbers on this sheet here, the 8 million that's in parentheses, and then the projected numbers that you've got down below that, that's about 25 million.
Well,
So you
that's
take
with the
25 million off of, correct, but that's money that's
it-
going to be
it-
spent.
yeah, potentially. And we
Potentially.
haven't budgeted that money. But because we're just talking about broad strokes right now. So 25 million, so that's 75 million is what the money that right now that we're looking at. Good. Good point.
So once we do have that remaining balance number finalized, because we wanted it to be as accurate as possible, and it just wasn't, we weren't able to make that happen up to this point right now, just for various reasons I can tell you after the meeting. We'll send this out updated to everyone with that number in there and everything else updated. But this is, as far as we know, very accurate as far as expenditures to date.
Madam Chair. Just so as we start looking at now, approximately 75 million, are we going to take a look at going forward in, okay, so we've got 22's allocation, the allocation for payroll for 23, 24, and 25. So we have 3 more years. Has that number been projected out yet? Because we're looking at a 75 million whole number right now of the total of 103. We should have an idea of what that's going to be conceptually.
And so that is the projections that Joe Onzik has produced in a chart that he showed us previously when he gave us a breakdown of what would it look like if we took 4% revenue recoupment, 3% and 2%. With that presentation is the chart that shows the projections for those years of how much payroll reimbursement we might be eligible for.
Do we have that number right now?
No. I don't, yes, the number exists. I do not have the number and I'm not confident of how it would translate on the document. So I left it open.
So
that I can show an awareness of what we know. I probably should have added known deductions on there.
If you would like me to pull up that
well, I'm
chart from
just,
Mr. Onzik, I can do that right now.
if we're looking at hypothetically 11 million and just kind of forecasting that out, because we're just talking 30, let's say it's $30,000, $30 million more. So what did I say? So we've got now $45 million then, approximately, I mean, big approximate, that is going to be discretionary money to use for any additional community support grants and internal grants. Big picture, I mean, really broad picture on that. So it's nice to have some context to it.
So as you see on the screen, those are the projections that Mr. Onzik produced. So in the total section, you have 20.6 million and then the $500,000 for public health personnel. So over the next few years, those are the projected numbers that we'll be able to reimburse. But again, we need to, once we have our consultant on board, they'll be vetting which personnel are actually eligible because those requirements have changed compared to the CARES Act. And so we're going to have to double down on what is behind those numbers and make sure. So I'm guessing that that's pretty darn close to what the actuals will be, though. Have faith in Haynes' team that they've been looking at this pretty closely. So, have any questions? Any other questions regarding this worksheet? Okay, I will stop sharing screen. Update on departmental requests. So we have 2 departments that asked for some extensions, and I believe tomorrow they will be submitting their final request. I'm hearing some feedback. This is this device. All right. And so we don't have all of the, now I'm in the process of compiling all of the information because it's not so easy to just produce the reports as I discovered. So I was hoping to have those all for you today, or at least what we have up to this date. But I'm confident that by Monday at the latest, you will all have a very large PDF file that will contain all of the requests that have come in. There are 60 as of right now. And let's see. just to give you an idea of what we're talking about when I say that it's a bit complicated to produce these reports. I'll share my screen one more time and show you what I see. So here we have the portal. So far, 60 have been submitted. It does not give just a total of all of the requests anywhere. So it does require that we'll have to go in and manually input numbers to get you a grand total of what we're looking at. You can download a PDF that gives you a summary of the application, which is good. But each application, most applications come along with supporting documents. And that's where things get a little fuzzy. So the application questions, which are very helpful in helping us understand the project, how the department feels that it qualifies under the ARPA, and various other things about community impact, equity, and things like that. In the supporting documents, you have to either download all attachments into a zip file, which then creates a complication because when you unzip the files, the file names are too long because this program adds a bunch of numbers to each title that you can't edit as you unzip it. It might be going over all your head. It's kind of technical. It's very annoying. Let's just summarize it that way. So every single one of these documents has to be downloaded separately. And so I'm in the process of doing that, putting those all into appropriate folders for each department. And then everything will be put into a document for you all to digest at will. Once we do have a consultant firm on board, these requests will be handed off to them to vet for eligibility and to help kind of give us a sort of breakdown of which requests are really solid, appropriate, and eligible uses of the money, which are justifiable under the act, and which, if there are any, are not justifiable or are not eligible under the act. And I think that's also going to really help us in our decision making when we want to talk about which projects from our departments we would like to fund and which we wouldn't. We'll be talking about that anyway. We're not going to wait for the consultant firm to give us all that to start voicing our thoughts on all these things. So just so you know that. Once you have this in hand, we can talk about it at the next meeting. But that's the process that we're going with right now, as far as I understand it. Mr. Tepe.
Mr. Chair, Tepe here. I want to repeat it just so I understand. We're going to have an outside firm come in and vet any department request on an internal basis. That's not going to be done by our organization or by our board based upon the fact that we, in most instances, manage or are appropriately the management of some of these functions report through our committees. So we're going to bring an outside organization in that's going to do a detailed audit of their requirements.
I could say it another way. Any expenditure that we've spent some money to date very carefully and selectively, but going forward, any expenditures that we agree upon, we want to have checked out. That's what we did with the CARES Act last year as well. When we had grant money going out to various entities and organizations, everything had to be looked at first to make sure that it's eligible, because if we're not compliant with the federal statutes on how to spend federal grant money, we'll have to pay it back. So that's what I mean. Basically, for our departmental requests, for our community support grants, any of those kinds of things, we want to have that double checked. We don't have staff resources right now to go through 60 applications and do all the math and homework to tell us that, yes, they're eligible. We assume that most of our department heads and their teams have been able to ascertain eligibility based on the documents available, but we always have to double check the math.
Do we not have the availability of personnel from the state's attorney's department to assist with that?
I haven't been
They were
informed.
certainly involved in helping to get this explained to us.
I haven't been informed that the state's attorney's office has any personnel that can help in this effort. If that is something that is true, then we'll have that discussion. And of course, we'd like to have their help.
This just John Martin with a question.
Mr. Martin, go ahead.
One of it is confirmation. I gather from the conversation with Mr. Tepe that in fact, the department heads and the electeds were given a framework of standards that they were to apply in making their requests. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and secondly, we have not pursued the extent to which the state's attorney's office, either with existing or additional staff, could address these issues on our behalf. We have not looked at that issue. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, well, I would certainly want to do that before I'd hire an outside consultant, number one, investigate that so the committee knows what that response is. And secondly, if we assume that, not if we assume, if in fact the people making requests had a structure in place of what was valid, other than what I would hope to be nuances of interpretation, if they've asked us for a gross sum of money, we'd have reason to believe that that was pretty close to being what in fact they were entitled to ask for under the Rescue Act. And to conclude that thought, therefore, if we had a gross number before us of what has been asked for in the 60 and soon to be 62 requests, would we not then have a basis for beginning a discussion of what was available for outside distribution and what was necessary in-house?
I think there's many ways we could go with this. We can certainly take a look at the total and as a committee, just start determining we're only going to fund, let's say if $60 million, we're only going to fund $30 million of requests, and we can just start the process before anybody vets this information to say which projects we would like to look into for funding, and then hand it off to either the state's attorney's office or a consultant firm. Michelle is here. I guess it's appropriate to ask you right now, is there any option that you see where the state's attorney's office would be able to undertake this kind of eligibility vetting for us? It hasn't come up in conversation before, so.
Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate for us to perform an auditing function, number one. Number two, we do not have the staff to do what we did last year. It was an incredibly, we probably devoted 1, 2, 3, I think 4 attorneys pretty much for the entire month of December. I remember November, December, to continuously look at the various applications that came in for the various programs. And we were not doing the initial auditing vetting. So the procedure that we used under the CARES Act is the applications would come in. We employed Fabiola Guzman as a program manager to do the initial vetting to make sure that we had all the documents necessary to actually assess, to determine whether there were eligible expenses. Once the documents were in place, it was handed off to the auditing firm KEB, who did really the auditing function to determine eligibility of each individual expense as compared to the rule. We then prepared the contract. We then signed off on KEB's work and sent out the contract. It was a very, it's a very labor intensive review. We do need a consulting firm to do that auditing review to determine eligibility and to make sure we have the backup we need to provide to the federal government.
Thank you, Ms. Neerman. Hold on, Mr. Martin, does that answer some of your question or change any of your thinking on the matter?
It doesn't change my thinking. It just answers but it does answer my question. I just want to make certain that we've investigated our options before we proceed with a third party advisor.
Yeah, and I apologize, I didn't ask that question before now. I think it was just assumed based on conversations that I've had with state's attorney.
Yeah.
So, but thank you for raising the issue.
I have,
And
Mr. Tepe was
Ms.
next.
Neerman, was that done for internal departments or was that just done for the external requests?
It was a different procedure for the internal departments. We didn't have, the contract element to it. So, but KEB did audit all expenses to make sure that they were eligible expenses under the rule. And so yes, they perform that auditing function.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Because we have 60, 62 potential or 63 applications that'll be coming through in total. And to Mr. Teppi's point, many of these applications come through committees. Ag may have one, Energy and Environment may have another, Public Health may have another. Could these be diced up, referred to the committee? The committee then evaluates the multitude of applications that may come through. Maybe they have 2, maybe they have 4. Decide which ones they feel they would like to move forward and bring those back to the ARPA committee for the ARPA committee's review and approval. And then have it go to vetting, because we have a finite amount of resources. And I know that there is going to be a bigger ask than what we're able to fund if we're using the $45 to $50 million range. It may be an easier way to analyze this because each of the chairmen or chair people of the committees and related committees has an in-depth knowledge, or at least a working knowledge of what these issues are about, where the ARP committee may not have that full capacity. But certainly they would have the full vetting responsibility. If 2 or 3 applications came through from, let's say, Energy and Environment, they go, well, we would like you to consider these 2. These are our 2 top ones.
Thank you for that idea, Madam Chair. We do have a number of committee chairs present here today. So I think it would be appropriate, certainly, what do you guys think of that idea? Would you rather go through that for our process for looking at these departmental requests, where we, divvy it up to the appropriate committees and let those committees recommend things forward? Is there anybody who would oppose that method of doing this? Ms. Bates?
I think it's a good idea, and I'm getting a fox in the hen house kind of feeling that I, as the Energy and Environmental Committee, would vet all of my requests as very good and very, worthy. Mr. Frost might vet all of the so that's my concern about that.
Well, you do have the committee underneath you as the chair, and
Yes.
so
So
that's where the votes.
I mean, that could be a place to start, but then I think there would have to be more.
Mr.
vetting than that.
Mr. Teppi?
Mr. Sanchez, this is John Martin, man, making a
Go ahead,
comment.
Mr. Martin.
I kind of building on Mavis's comments. I'm not certain that chairmen are going to do are not going to be aggressive on behalf of their committee and the officials and department heads that they represent from that committee. So I think that it might, depending on committee involvement, might, with all courtesy extended, might add a step to the process that doesn't really move us closer to the ultimate necessity of taking requests as they come and paring them down. And, time is always going to be an issue, as is I can't think of the second adjective, but time is always going to be an issue. And if these could, and I'm afraid that I'm concerned that committee involvement could delay without the production of benefit.
Thank you for that, Mr. Martin. Mr. Teppi?
Teppi here. I'd like to aggressively disagree with Mr. Martin.
That's never happened before.
How dare you?
I think it would be much more beneficial to have it done that way through the department chairs, because we already know a lot about these organizations, and it would create an involvement that I think would enhance and increase the understanding of the process to all of the board members. And we can help to vet this and move this process along, in my opinion, faster than having some outside organization come in and have to do it from primarily an impartial basis, but certainly from a basis of starting at ground zero, because we wouldn't be starting at ground zero. And as you said, you have some 62 requests or some number like that might be, so it's not an insurmountable number that would be looked at, and it would be looked at by the committee, not just by the chair of the committee.
See, and Vern thought he was disagreeing with me, and he's not as much in disagreement as he thought. Can I make a comment?
You can respond to that, Mr. Martin. Yes.
I wasn't assuming that we should just hand this cold turkey to an outside consultant. What I was trying to avoid, and I think I remembered my second train of thought here, is a committee chairman. I don't want to be in a position of negotiating against myself when I get 4 projects from the development group, and I'm going to say, well, I think I can sell this, and I think I can't sell that, and let's cut this back to, you know what I mean? I feel like the committee chairmen are either going to be as aggressive as Mavis has announced she will be, or we're going to be in an awkward position of negotiating against ourselves. And I'm not suggesting we hand this off to another committee. I'm saying maybe we or to a third party consultant. That may be a conversation that this committee needs to have among its members, and get a more rational balancing of priorities.
I have some small thoughts on this, but there's some hands up, so we're going to hear those first. Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I think we as a committee here really have to define how we're going to prioritize these requests, both internally and externally. And I think, quite honestly, there is one criteria that needs to stand first and foremost in every request, and that's eligibility. And that should be able to be defined pretty directly. Once we get through the eligibility area, then we can take a look at the total amount of requests and then decide if they're justifiable or they need to be amended or whatever. But I do think that we as a committee, we have a number of things to do before we can consider hiring a consulting firm until we find out how much money we have, number one, which hasn't been defined. And number two, what's going to be left, if anything, after we go through all the internal requests that are eligible and justifiable. And then that's when I think we need to have a consulting firm to help us with respect to reports and auditing and everything else. But I think the initial phase of vetting and going over all of these criteria, number one, we've got to decide what requests are eligible. And that should be something that every department head and elected official in Kane County should be aware of and should be able to say, we are eligible because of A, B, and C. Once the eligibility is done, then we can look at the justification. But until we know it's eligible, number one, and then number two, reasonably justifiable, we can't really define how much we need internally or what we'll have for external. So, to have an outside firm come in and discuss with our department heads and elected officials what they think is proper or adequate is going to be extremely time consuming, number one, and number two, and probably more importantly, very expensive. So I agree with Mr. Tepe, even though he and I don't agree too often. I agree with Mr. Tepe's conclusions. And I think Mr. Martin is basically saying the same thing, maybe in a different way. Of course, he's an attorney. We have to take that into account.
Mr. Shepro, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not a committee chair, but I'm on committees, and I think that the chairs who say, well, we're just going to rubber stamp what our department wants, I don't think they really believe that. I think the committee works harder than that. And so I do agree with Mr. Tepe's comments that I think a committee review is appropriate. the eligibility is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for approving it. I mean, yes, they have to be eligible, but then somebody that should not be the consultant has got to set the parameters as to what eligible costs are appropriate. I mean, something may be eligible, and I think we heard earlier, there was a proposal, somebody, wants to hire a physician for, $300,000 a year. But, you've got to decide as a committee, and the board has to decide as a policy, are we going to fund salaries or something for a position when we know the money will run out at some point? And do you really want to spend your money that way? And I think those are questions that the committee and the board has to answer, not a consultant.
Just to adjust that quickly, that is, as far as I understand, how we would proceed, is not having a consultant make those determinations for us. And looking at the contract and statement of work that I've seen from the potential consultant, they want nothing to do with that. That's not their wheelhouse. That's our job. They're just there to let us know that, yes, things are eligible, inform us of other things. And we'll get to that conversation later in the agenda. But just real quick, I wanted to say that that is the work of the committee entirely, to come up with those kinds of parameters.
Well, I will, if the committee permits, I have a number of comments to the resolution, which will be appropriate at that point. Thank you.
We'll not permit that. I'm sorry, Mr. Shepro. Ms. Molina, I'm kidding, of course. I'm kidding, of course.
Thank you. This is Myrna. So what I'm hearing is basically two things. One is we want to define what the ARP committee is doing and what the framework of the ARP committee is. I think our chairman knows and has an idea already. I think we have new members on this committee who just need it to be explained to them. We've been doing a lot of background work in the last 6 months as to what this committee was to do, how to send the applications. There's a process to submit things on the portal. So that's already been kind of like a behind the scenes framework. I just think a lot of our committee members need to be put to date to what we've been doing so far. That's how I'm hearing it. If my committee members are mistaken, please let me know. But it seems like the work has already been done. It just really hasn't been explained to the rest of the committee. Because we have RFPs that have gone out for the consulting firms. The RFP explained the work that we're asking for. That's how you create an RFP. We know what the ARP committee is supposed to be doing, and I'm all about committee, and I respect the committee flow. But when you look at those applications, the majority of those applications are coming through environment, public health, and public and safety, which is, as a chairman of Public Safety Committee, I can tell you our meetings are already an hour and a half long. And if I'm going to be adding, 20 of those applications to my committee, then we need to be, I need to let our committee members know, 4 of them are already on this committee, 5 of them are already on this committee. So I respect the committee flow, but I think we're on the right track. I just think everybody needs to know what track we're on. So as the ARP committee chair, I think that might be something that we're going to need you to do, is just kind of give us a narrative as to where we're at, what the flow is, so that we're all on the same page. Because I think all the pieces are there. They're all in the toolbox though. So I think maybe we just need to lay them out.
Well, if I understand you correctly, I would say how we undertake this process is really up to the committee. I have a concept in my mind of what would be a good flow, and I've mentioned having us look at it, send it off to the third party for eligibility verification, and then bouncing that back to us to further our conversations that we've been having. Another way to slice it is to say we get the total request, we all look at it, and we either just determine an amount that we want to all agree upon that will be funded, and then we start paring projects down even before they've been vetted for eligibility, just simply based upon our will and opinions. So that's another way we could do that. And a third way, which has been presented today, is to have the committees recommend projects up to this committee first. Does that make sense? Does that address what you're asking?
Well, I'm understanding where we're at. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And rather than maybe having a verbal maybe we should have put a PowerPoint together and said, these are the 3 ways that this committee can flow. And which one do we all agree with?
And so we could still talk about this, and I'm
Yeah.
fully okay with that, to entertain this. I was going to suggest that we actually bring this up again at our next meeting on the 20th, and then there make a final determination on how we would like to proceed with these departmental requests. Just throwing that out there before I take some more comments.
Because I think that's going to help a lot of people understand the need for the consulting firm. And if, you know, I'm not sure what Mr. Martin's hesitancy is, but I guess I'll keep listening to it. Why the consulting firm is needed now versus why it's needed in 3 months. So
Mr.
we'll
Brown.
get there, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Brown speaking. I guess one of the benefits of almost being the last one to speak is everything's already been said that I was going to say. But a couple points that I wanted to bring up, because it was brought up, is have we asked the state's attorney's office, or do we have the staff internally to take care of this? And I believe that that has been discussed quite a lot in the past. I'm pretty sure Joe Onzik has said that he doesn't have the personnel. I know I've talked to Scott Berger, and he has said, you know, when CARES Act came along, it hijacked him. It was like, you know, hijacking a 737. Everything that he had going on got put on the shelf for a matter of months, and that disrupted everything that obviously he was trying to get done. So he strongly suggested bringing on somebody that could take this program from the beginning to the end. I do believe we're going to need a consultant. As being part of the interview process, I learned a lot in that process, because there's an awful lot of work that has to be done for the reporting. If you don't get these reports done right and timely, the Treasury Department is going to say you owe the money. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done. And from what I'm trying to say is we don't have the staff internally that can do that. My question is until my point, I guess, is until we see these internal requests, what they're looking for, I don't know the extent of the work the treasurer, the consultant is going to have to do. I know Peter has asked, and you, Mr. Chair, have asked the Ernst & Young to put together a forecast of the amount of work, the amount of hours, the amount of money they're forecasting for the first 6 months. And I just don't know really how we can rely on that number when here we are sitting here discussing what it is that they're going to do. So how can they put together that number? So I'm just not comfortable with that at this point. And we're down to 45 million in essence is what it sounds like that we're going to have left to distribute. And if we've got internal request of 100 million, we may not have, but however we whittle it down, 5 million to distribute to the outside world, which is going to make the reviewing and the reporting a whole lot simpler than if we had 500 requests from the outside world. So I feel as though we need to see what our internal requests are, work on those, other than the 4 million that we've already designated is going to be going out, work on those before we get too carried away with anything else. I also had I had a couple of board members ask me, well, if we're not going to be doing a lot on the outside, then couldn't Peter, our project manager, handle this work that needs to be done for our internal requests? So maybe, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I hate to put you on the spot, but maybe if you could explain a little bit about what Peter's roles are and his responsibilities, so we can clarify that. You know, could he take the place of the consultant if we don't have a lot of outside work to do?
I think it was best answered by Assistant State's Attorney Neerman, that even in the state's attorney's office, they don't have the adequate staff to go through the eligibility verification process for internal requests, external requests, anything like that of that nature. And in fact, last year with the CARES Act, the state's attorney didn't even perform that function for us. Nor did Scott Berger's team. They worked with KEB. They went through applications, but sent it off to the third-party consultant to do that kind of work. And that required a team. So if Mr. Phillips thinks he's up to the task, it's still not enough. One person can't provide all of those services for us. It's a gargantuan task. Even if we were to pare down our internal requests by half right out of the gate, that's still a lot of paperwork to go through, and it would take one person an extremely long period of time to do. As far as Mr. Phillips's role, so far he's been working really hard at getting a sense of the territory with this program and with how the county runs, finding out who the key players are, making lines of communication open up and available, determining, where do I go for permissions and how do we do things? How do we get things done? Any projects that we have, he'll be overseeing those projects and giving us reports and updates on the status of those things. I won't be giving PowerPoints on that stuff going forward. That'll be Mr. Phillips in time as we go along. So a lot of the things that we would love to do in-house, we just don't have those kinds of resources. So we will need the consultant firm. And I'll address some of the other comments you had regarding that when we get to that part of the agenda.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Caius had his hand up earlier. I'll entertain his question.
Thank you. Yes, as Ms. Caius, as chairman of the admin committee, I'm not sure I would see any of these anyway. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But as the chairman, I am not the expert on the departments that report to me. I rely on experts to give me advice on where our committee, so we can get a consensus from the committee. Sending something to me or to the committee to vet and spend a lot of time on vetting whether it's appropriate or not. And we do policy, we might set some limits on it, but I would be very concerned about I would be concerned if the things came to us and then we spent a lot of time, and expertise that I don't think we have in the first place, saying, okay, this is something we want to do, then I would send it off to the consultant. The consultant would say, oh, well, it doesn't qualify. So we've already allotted a lot of time doing that in our committees. It seems to me that it would be the consultant that would first, like you had said, vet to make sure that it does qualify before we involve our committees, which already have a job to do. And just like with our estates attorney and our OCR office, they already have a job to do. Piling this on the committee would be, I think, a burden that we couldn't overcome. I would see them not selecting the ones we are going to do, but at least eliminating the ones that wouldn't qualify, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on something that isn't going to qualify in the end run anyway. So just my point of view.
Mr. Berman, you're another committee chair. You haven't had anything to say. Do you have any comments on this? I didn't want to put you on the spot, but just because you are a committee chair of at least one of our committees, right? All right, Ms. Bates, you have a question or comment?
A couple of people have said that we won't need a consultant if, in fact, we just use up all the money on internal requests. I would like to say that I don't think we should let ourselves get to that point. And I think that we can have set a philosophical intention that not more than 50% or 40% or 30% will go to internal requests, so that we make sure that this money goes out into the community, because we don't want to face all our nice nonprofits and say to them, well, we use this on filling potholes. That is my worst dream come true. So I think we cannot or should not go to this idea that we won't need a consultant because we won't need to give any money away because we'll use it all up internally.
Well, I think the state's attorney's office made it clear that we do have need for a consultant firm. So it's not a matter of if, it's more a matter of when.
And I'm saying soon.
And what, yeah.
And for what, yes.
We will be needing a consultant to help us with these community grants, and it's going to be more than $4 million when we're done.
Ms. Molina?
If I can just add, if I understand correctly, regardless of whether or not it's internal or external, we still have to report to the government. So we still have to have somebody who is responsible to make sure that we're doing everything possible, correct?
And make sure that we're compliant with federal statutes.
And I guess a side thing is everything that we do for the county, we do for all of the members of our county. So anything that our ARPA funds are used for are going to be used for the betterment of all our community. because it's just less weight on our taxpayer. So I respectfully disagree with my partner across the aisle here. Everything we do will be beneficial for the community in one way or another. So whether or not it's money that we're spending internally or whether it's money that we're providing outside sources, it will benefit our community, which is the task that we've been given. So thank you.
I will say before I entertain another comment, some of the spirit of the act is to make sure that normal government services are not disrupted, so that doesn't then fall onto the taxpayers. So it's certainly appropriate, as we've already taken revenue recoupment money for revenue loss this year already. It's certainly appropriate to spend money internally in that manner. Outside of that, other appropriate or at least eligible uses that are coming in, there are many that I've seen that will benefit the community in one way or another. So beyond just the actual loss of revenue, there's some really good ideas that are coming in, which you will all see once I get that big document put together. You can come look at my computer anytime if you guys want. So. Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to say that I agree with Ms. Molina on what she said. Whatever we do here, whether it's internal or external, we're helping Kane County out. And I think that's very important. Secondly, I'd like to point out, in no way, shape, or form am I saying we do not need a consulting firm. We do. I just don't think we need it right now. I think we need to define things, find out where we're at, and then decide what we want that consulting firm to do. Ernst & Young, I think, is a preferred choice. I think they're a great company. I'm more than happy to have them handle this consulting process, but I don't think it has to be as quick or as all-encompassing as maybe we think initially, but it is definitely necessary with respect to following regulations, eligibility, auditing, all of those things. I get it, but I think we don't need to rush into hiring them now. We need to define things first and then hire them.
Mr. Sanchez.
Let's try and keep, and I appreciate the comment, but there is an agenda item related directly to that. So for this discussion item right now, let's try and stay on topic. I know it's related, but also
What is the topic?
there's a lot to talk about.
Okay.
The topic is departmental requests. What are we going to do with them? Mr. Shepro?
Yes.
And Mr. Martin.
One, I come back to Ms. Molina's suggestion of minutes ago, that I do think a flow chart PowerPoint that would set out a lot of these concepts. Speaking for people outside the committee, I'm not sure we really understand exactly what Peter's function is. And I think it would be helpful to have that defined. I think it would help answer some of the questions about where his work stops and where an outside consultant begins. And I think we might have gotten a little afield from what I thought the idea of committee review was. I'm certain that nobody intended to suggest that all they do on their committee is listen to what the staff says and do what they want. Because that's not as my understanding of what the committee's function is. It is an oversight committee, and if we don't have individual expertise on what they're talking about, at least the job of the committee is to still set policy and oversee what's going on. So I don't know that the suggestion is that the committee is going to be making necessarily legal judgments, but making policy judgments that will govern ultimately what the board has to do. And so I think Ms. Molina's suggestion would be an excellent starting point to help everybody understand what the role and the workflow is going to be before it gets to Madam Chair's desk.
Thank you, Mr. Shepro. Mr. Martin, you have a question or comment still?
Well, a comment. Mr. Brown's comment really struck with me here, and it reminded me of my past experience, and that is that sometimes problems become difficult because you have too many moving targets. And I want to make it clear that I am not opposed and believe, in fact, we do need an outside consultant. But I don't think have a good handle yet on the philosophical argument of how we deal with the money relative to inside and outside requests. And that's not going to be that clear an issue to deal with. But I think we need to first have those inside requests. And I'll give you an example from discussion with staff. A lot of the stuff that are going to be asked for as projects are going to be things that are going to directly benefit individuals or businesses outside of the county. So we need to have a good discussion. And I think instead of calling them inside requests, they're really requests precipitated by county officials and department heads. And some of those requests are going to go directly to the benefit of businesses, individuals, and otherwise. And we need to look at those because, to Mavis's point, we may be providing a lot more individual assistance than we anticipated through the county's auspices. And until we know what the county, what our staff and our elected officials are asking for and who those are going to benefit, to me, it's very difficult to move on to a discussion of saying how much should we leave for outside people. Some of this is just mechanical. We need to replace our losses, but to the degree that we're offering services that would assist in jobs, offering, buttressing the health department, all of these things are benefits to the community. But we got to know first, I think, what our county staff and elected officials are asking for, so we can have some at least crude evaluation of those programs and make a decision as to what money we may have available. And then we've only got one moving target.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding the concept of sending the departmental requests to committee for review, for initial review?
Mr. Chair, Gums.
Gums, go ahead.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'm new to this committee. I've been sitting back here, and fortunately for me, I've been at the meetings prior to my appointment. So I've been keeping track of things that have been going on. We've been talking about hiring this outside consultant for quite a long time. Currently, we're discussing these department asks. Yes, they are going to help everybody in the county. I have no doubt about that. Fundamentally, I do not like the idea of it going to other committees. To me, in my common sense brain, it says, well, that's kind of eliminating what we're doing here today. I think that is our responsibility on this committee to do.
Thank you, Ms. Gumps. Are there any other comments or questions in this portion of the meeting? Okay, so I think it would seem that it would be most appropriate if you would all agree that at our next meeting on the 20th, we discuss this idea of how to handle departmental requests in full. And I can put something together that just goes through a few different options. I will make sure to reach out to committee members for more input and ideas as we go along towards that meeting. And I would also like to reach out to the remaining committee chairs who are not present here today to get some of their input, just so that we have buy-in. I would hesitate to want to put things on another committee's agenda without the approval of that committee's chairman. So I do think it's important that we get everybody's input and then bring that back to the next committee meeting of this body to discuss. Is that agreeable to everyone here? Does anyone have an objection to that way of going about this?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that again, just so?
Can we play back the YouTube?
Assuming that you can get it about right.
Just basically at our next meeting, have the input from all committee chairs on this idea of letting committees vet it, and then discuss that as this committee, if we want to go that route or not. And then also having a presentation with different potential ways that we could go about not administering, but determining which departmental request we would like to entertain And that's where I'll make some phone calls to each of you to get your ideas on this, because I've got ideas, but I want to facilitate your thoughts and put that together into some options for us to consider at our next meeting. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just for clarification, when everyone was speaking, you talked about a flow chart. Myrna mentioned this, which I think is a very good idea. And there were 3 items brought up, and I only hear discussion now about one, on how we're going to vet these 62 potential applications. The first one was what the flow chart would look like if we sent it to the accounting firm to vet it first for eligibility. The second flow chart would take a look at total budget request versus total budget available. That's the second one. And the third one is the process of going, which you're just mentioning right now, going through the committees and then letting them make decisions and bringing that up. So are you going to be presenting the flow chart for all 3 of these? Because those are the notes that I had that was suggested as we started doing the discussion.
Those and any other ideas that committee members put forward.
So there'll be multiple flow charts then beyond this.
I'll cap it off at 12.
And then why I've got the microphone. We also, there was a request that we would know, with all due respect to Peter, what his presence is going to be, his work is going to be in processing these flow charts. So what his job is going to be
Yeah, we'll have
doing as we go through.
a better
all of this.
definition than my impromptu.
Oh, no, but it's going to be important. I mean, who's going to do what?
Right.
So that there's complete clarity for his role, and he has a complete understanding of what his responsibilities and role is going to be versus the committee's role.
Mhm. Yes, that is my understanding as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Brown.
one last comment from me on this. As far as do we send it back to committees to have them review and such? I know government takes a long time to do anything, but if the committee is going to review this, and we're going to have that discussion on the 20th of this month, if we decide on the 20th of this month to let the committees do the review, now the departmental requests have to go to those particular committees, which would potentially happen then in November, December. Then they're going to come out of those committees back to the ARP committee, potentially January, February. Before then, we even let a consultant start to review them. However long that process takes before we can then bring it back to the ARP committee to say that they meet the criteria. And now we whittle away at the money. So I'm losing track of time here, but I'm starting to think that we're saying sometime in May of next year, we may have some approval on some of these requests. And to Mavis's point, and to Myrna's point, some of these requests that we may be reviewing could be something that could be directly affecting the health department, which they could then distribute or however they do help in the community or other agencies. So it's a very, very long process in doing it that way. So I just, in my own little mind here, I'm thinking that maybe to try to speed this process up, we don't let the committees review it. We do it here at the ARP committee.
I'll put your comments in the cons section for this idea.
Just a comment.
Yeah, no, I understand. And if that is the will of the committee today, if you all would agree that we just don't even entertain the committee review process, let's have that conversation now. Is there anyone who feels we should absolutely go through that process?
I think I expressed my opinion that I didn't think it was needed.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this whole conversation is about capacity. If you know, I think we're saying, does this committee have the capacity to go through 62 or 63 internal requests? And have the knowledge and expertise to vet all of these. But on the other hand, if we send it back to the committees or back to the committee chairs, back to the, I think that's a redundant process. These requests are all coming out of the departments. They should have been, at least, when Jody made her request, she talked to me about it because it came through my committee. That should have been done already. So now, but do we have the capacity of what, 6, 7, 8 people now to look at those 60 issues? And that's where the consultant comes in. It's just, I mean, it's a little bit of a shell game. Who's gonna do the work? Are you gonna do it? Am I gonna do it? Who's gonna look at all of these and decide which ones if we don't have the help of the consultant right away?
Okay, so I'm kind of sensing that perhaps I should just ask for consensus to not entertain the committee review process for departmental requests.
Okay.
Is there anyone who would disagree with that consensus?
This is not committees. We're
Yes,
agreeing
I
not
would
to
just
go to
say-
committees,
So you would want it to go through your committee?
not
Yes.
me. Mr. Pepe, okay.
You're never gonna please everybody, young man.
Consensus
us too
does not
many
mean
choices.
unanimous.
Unanimous consent, of course. Okay, well, I think the majority of this committee is against the idea of a committee review process. So I will speak with each of you in between now and our next meeting to get some ideas of how you would like to handle this.
I have a short comment. You'll be glad to know. A committee such as Mr. Tepe's, if Mr. Tepe wants to vet his request, I suppose he could. It wouldn't hurt anything as long as he doesn't delay the
You know,
process.
I would say if a committee wants to put it on their next agenda and go through those requests and
anything.
provide recommendations to this body, there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
But we'll continue along with the process that we agree upon ourselves. Mr. Brown.
Last comment, I promise. I just want to make it clear, I truly believe in the committee process. I really believe in the structure of committees. But that being said, this is a committee. So that's what we're here for. And having not been on the Riverboat Grant Committee, it seems to me like this could be handled similar to that process. Am I correct in that?
I mean, that's kind of how I see it personally. But we'll have this conversation at on the 20th to get everyone's input on how we want to proceed with handling these departmental requests. Any other very brief comments or questions that are absolutely going to add something to the conversation in the moment? Mr. Shepro, I'm looking at you. I'll say yes.
I guess if the reason for not sending it to the committees is because we don't think the committees have the expertise to do it, I'm wondering, with all respect to all of you, why this committee has so much more expertise to bring to bear than the standing committees. And that's a question, a rhetorical question.
We have you and Tepe,
And
two aces.
I think I heard multiple reasons not to go that route. So I don't think that was the sole reason.
And if I can, eventually the committee chairs, whether it gets vetted first by the committee chair or by this committee first, the committee chairs are going to be working with those programs and managing those budgets regardless. And eventually they will go to Mr. Berman. All budgets will go to Mr. Berman.
Possibly even working with committee members.
Correct. That's correct. So the committee chairs, whether or not you want to vet it first or secondly, you're going to have it. It belongs to you.
Mhm.
Truly does.
And they came from us too.
I don't know. It may have come through you, but I don't know. I don't know if it's come through every committee chair. I don't know.
Right.
Okay.
Hey, let me help you.
Mr. Kenyon.
I would move we adjourn. And we could work on logic before we come to another meeting. Not put the cart before the horse. Or spend money we don't have to.
We're getting there. We're getting to that adjournment point.
Real money.
Is that a real motion?
I'll move we adjourn.
We're not to that part of the agenda yet.
Motion to adjourn is in order at any time.
Okay, well, if
You're
you guys,
exhausting yourself by regurgitating everything like a cow.
Mr. Chairman, Strathman here.
Strathman, go ahead.
I just have a technical question. The link for the listening session on Thursday evening, is that the same link as was last night's meeting?
I haven't compared the two links to determine that, so I will follow up with you after the meeting.
Thank you very much.
I guess you didn't get a second.
Okay, so there are a couple other items on the agenda. If there's no second to adjourn. Okay, that means you guys want to talk about it. Committee allocation ideas. Let's get to the resolution first, because I think that's kind of the meat of where we're at, and then come back to these committee ideas, the allocation ideas that we postponed from our last meeting. We've kind of already sort of danced around that concept, but let's get to the resolution so we can just get the business done in case there is anyone else that will need to leave at a certain point as it is getting on in the day. So I will entertain a motion in a second for the resolution authorizing agreement for professional services of consulting firm to assist in planning, accounting, distribution, and reporting of American Rescue Plan Act funds and corresponding budget adjustment.
Bates moves.
Bates moves.
Strathman second.
Molina seconds. Okay, before any other conversation, I would just like to say, understanding some of the opinions on this resolution already, we did have some action at the previous meeting of the executive committee that made an option available for this resolution to move from this committee onto that executive committee agenda for next Tuesday. And so in that spirit, I would at least just suggest that we move this forward in that light to give a little more time for information to come in that has been requested of various members, and then to have a more thorough conversation after that information has been obtained on Tuesday. But certainly it is the will of this committee if you want to vote it up or down straight up today, or to vote it forward as just a recommendation to be discussed at the special meeting of the executive committee. So I'm just going to throw that out there at the beginning, and I will take comments, questions, concerns on this resolution at this time. Mr. Kenyon.
I think the resolution's too vague and we should be more specific about. So I'll vote against it just for that reason. The idea is all right, but you have to be more specific on what you're going to do.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with Mr. Kenyon. I think there are too many things we have to decide before we can decide to hire a consulting firm right now. They are needed, and I look forward to hiring them somewhere down the road, but we have too many things to define first, and I don't like a sense of urgency that we have to do it right now, plus the fact that we just got this resolution this morning, and I never vote to approve a resolution if I haven't had 48 hours to review it.
Mr. Seppi.
First off, I would like to say that primarily I agree with Mr. Kenyon, making a point that way I don't have to say that I agree with Mr. Leonard. But my concerns are very much in the same genre. It's all of a sudden I get a document that says the estimate for the first 6 months is $650,000. And that's on a resolution that, as Mr. Kenyon said, it's a bit vague. And I'm all in agreement that we need to have an organization assisting us, and we need to go through the process, but we need to all be included in this process. So it appears to me that we're rushing this through, and we need to dot our i's and cross our t's for our own sake, as well as for the fiduciary responsibility we have to all of our constituents. So I will not be moving this forward, or my vote won't be moving this forward today, but I'm going to read it all in depth.
Before I entertain anything else, could I ask someone from the state's attorney's office to come and just explain the resolution as it stands, why it is in the form it is. And if we were to, let's say, bring this to the county board next week, what would that look like in regards to the actual contracts and the scope of work and the kinds of input we would want from members?
So Vince Coyle again from the State Attorney's Office. There's a couple things. So we received the agreement as well as the statement of work on Monday. So we started looking at that. So the our review so far of the statement of work, we do have some questions as to the specifics. So it's and once those questions are answered, we can put them into the resolution. One of the things that in our review of the agreement and the statement of work is drafting the reports. That is going to be a critical need. One of the things in the statement of work, it was unclear whether the consultant was actually going to be drafting the reports for us to submit, or whether they were just going to give advice and assistance and guidance in drafting those reports. Another issue dealing with the accounting, as you know, Joe Onzik and Erica and the team are very busy already. And it's not, it looks like from the statement of work, I don't know the specific level of which this consulting firm will assist in the accounting, and a good discussion with Joe Onzik and how he views this consulting firm to assist in the accounting portion of this, because it is going to be a large task. Those specific details, once we receive them, can be put in the resolution as well. And then also the eligibility. It does seem like the statement of work does indicate that the consultant will help with the eligibility, but certainly how that process goes can be put into the resolution specifically. I did hear a comment about the 6-month fee schedule, or that the proposal had put out. One of the things that we from the State's Attorney's Office is requesting is a specific detailed scope of work that outlines where those funds are being spent as it relates to the ARP funds, how specifically they are going to be working month to month in those 6 months. They have a number, they must have a idea of how they're going to be working. So once those specific details are given to us, we can definitely add those to the resolution. It's just a matter of when we get those specific details.
Mr. Shepard. Thank you, Mr. Coyle.
Well, just playing off of Mr. Coyle's comments, I've been doing work in this area for almost 45 years. It'll be next week. It will be my 45th anniversary. This might be about the worst and vaguest resolution I've ever seen brought forward that is requesting action by a public body. As was pointed out, it's extremely vague. I think the state's attorney's already indicated that all sorts of key questions that have been asked today by committee members don't have answers. Apparently, am I correct that the resolution that refers to attached Exhibit A, there is no attached Exhibit A at this point? I mean, what I got is a 2-page resolution that refers to an attached Exhibit A, but am I right that there is no Exhibit A? I failed to see.
There's the draft documents that we have. That is it.
No, but you did, but it wasn't distributed as part of this resolution.
It's not connected to that
Okay.
PDF file.
I mean, well, so that is the agreement that is proposed. The resolution says it is a draft agreement subject to minor modifications. All I can do is say, get 2 lawyers together and ask them to agree on what are minor modifications, and you will get 3 different answers probably. With a final draft to be prepared with approval by the state's attorney's office. The dollar amounts are all blank. There is a long list of things that they are going to do, but to the point that was just made by state's attorney, there's no breakdown of the timeline, the specific tasks. the amount of those tasks. And apparently there is not a clarification about exactly what critical tasks are included in the price tag and what will be extra add-ons. And then finally, in the now therefore it be it resolved, it authorizes the chairman to enter into a professional services agreement with, presumably we know the name of the firm, for a period of months blank for a long list of things, not to exceed a blank amount, to execute all documents related to the engagement as finalized and approved by the county board, the chairman of this committee, and the state's attorney. So if you actually pass this, and I don't think legally, it's bad policy, but I don't think you legally could really pass this. If you pass this, you haven't accomplished anything because it says as finalized and approved by the county board. So since it's not going to be in a position to be finalized and approved, if we pass this resolution, you'd have to bring another resolution to finalize and approve it. So I just think it is incredibly premature to pass this. I agree with everything everybody said about the need for the consultant, but I just don't think I've ever seen an agreement for so much money that has so many unanswered questions.
Mr. Chairman, when it's appropriate, I'd like to speak. Two things. Number one, many of the people that are being asked to vote on this today haven't even seen this because we're attending this meeting via Zoom. So to me, it's an unseen resolution described by people as being very vague. And the second thing, and I don't mean to use a lot of fancy legal talk, but this looks to me like we're being like we're going to go off half-cocked here. We don't know what we're doing. We have, if it's all blanks, what supervision, what scrutiny, what fiduciary responsibilities are we meeting to our constituents by moving this forward at this point in time? What we're talking about is the necessity for having enough there that we can actually make a valid decision. And I know I'm just repeating in other words things that other people have said, but I can't support voting on something A, that I've never even seen, and B, with all of these voids in it. I think it's a disservice. It's a disservice to the project. It's a disservice to our constituents, and I'm very uncomfortable with the prospect of moving this forward, saying we're going to get a whole bunch of stuff over the weekend that we're going to all sit and review. I don't like it. I'm very uncomfortable with it. End of.
Ms. Molina.
I guess after hearing everybody's comments, I agree. I think we don't have, the time clock isn't ticking. We're not gonna, the bomb isn't gonna explode if we don't approve this today. I'm gonna make a motion to table till our October 20th meeting.
You just got ahead of me. I was going to recommend the same thing.
I'll second that. Deputy will second.
Hold on.
There's already been.
State's attorney with some information.
Thank you for your indulgence once again on Robert's rules. We had an inquiry raised about last month's board meeting and the use of the motion to table. The motion to table is properly as a motion to lay on the table. It's meant to really lay something temporarily on the table for this particular meeting that you're at, and then to pick it back up again so that you can address more urgent business. So if you would indulge us and perhaps rephrase that as a motion to postpone to a certain time, that might avoid some challenges.
Ms. Molina
down
and
the
Mr.
road.
Tepe, would you agree to switch this to postpone to the October 20th meeting?
So instead of table, we should use postpone or refer to our following meeting.
Motion to postpone to a definite date being
Okay.
the October 20th meeting.
Okay, motion to postpone till our next meeting,
October 20th.
which is
definite
currently
date.
scheduled for October 20th.
Great.
Mr. Tepe agrees.
I wanted to think about it for a while. Yes, I,
Do you need, are you sure? You got enough time to think about it? Okay. So
Wasn't,
we can have conversation on a postponement.
Mr.
Michelle,
Chair,
can we have conversation on a postponement, a discussion on?
That motion is debatable.
It is debatable.
Okay.
wasn't there already a motion made to discuss and potentially approve this resolution?
Yes.
So if we simply vote this resolution down, it can be brought back
could
at a
be
future
brought
date.
Absolutely.
Yes, which was
Yeah.
another way to slice it. Yeah.
Yeah, you could either vote.
Because we haven't voted on the resolution that's been brought forward yet.
And everyone can just abstain when they vote. So it's just a wash.
But you now have that motions taking precedence
But
over
we're
the
taking
main motion.
action and the action is to postpone further debate until October 20th. If we take action to kill this motion now, then we're,
I'll entertain the motion to postpone to a definite date of October 20th.
thank you.
Ms. Bates.
I can agree that there are many blanks in the ordinance, and I believe postponing would be a good idea.
Thank you. Yeah, I will say just from my own perspective, just, you know, having the nose down to the grindstone, I'm kind of aware of the conversations we've had with the consultant firm and the kind of work that they've agreed that they would do for us. So I think that's where I'm coming from in being comfortable with moving this so quickly. I completely understand everyone's comments and reservations. Mr. Kenyon, do you need something? So I just wanted everyone to know it wasn't a scenario of trying to just push something through and not require the proper amount of breathing room for this kind of decision. It was more, I kind of had the understanding that everyone knew we were trying to move quickly on this and that it would be a kind of an acceptable way to go about this. But I apologize for that misunderstanding on my part. And I do support postponing this. I don't want to delay the selection and onboarding of a firm, but there are very substantial questions that need to be addressed and information that needs to be provided to everyone so that we can all be comfortable to the same degree that I am comfortable with bringing a firm on to administer the kind of work that we're going to need. Ms. Bates.
So there was discussion during the executive committee meeting to bring this up at the special executive committee meeting on October 12th.
No,
That is no longer
That
going
won't.
to take place.
It will not be brought up.
If this motion passes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If it passes. Okay.
it redirects it.
I think we need a second.
We had one.
We have a second.
Got a second.
Melina
second.
and Tepi.
All right.
Yeah, think about it.
Any other questions, comments, song and dance routines anyone would like to do? Oh,
Does this mean Ms. Bates withdraws her motion that she made prior?
Yes.
what prior?
yes,
Melina seconded?
yes,
Is that correct?
right. The original motion, well, because we're
No, no, you
postponing,
don't-
so we don't have
No.
to.
You make a motion when
Okay.
you're going to discuss, you have to open debate to discuss the motion, which we did. And
Yeah,
now the
right.
request is to postpone the discussion until October 20th.
Right, so that we don't have to go
Motion
back to
made
that
and
original motion in second.
There was a motion made and seconded to approve.
Right,
Then there was a motion made and seconded to
Postpone.
postpone that discussion
That
to.
takes
the 20th.
precedence.
So should I
both-
withdraw?
No, because
no,
you
it's
have to make
still-
a motion to discuss. And the motion you made was to approve and potentially discuss.
Uh-huh.
We've discussed it and we've decided we're going to continue to postpone discussion until October 20th.
Okay.
Or you
And,
will in a moment.
Jenny, for your
hopefully.
sake, I'll have you work with the state's attorney to discover the best way to do this on the procedural agenda and.
But the original motion is not withdrawn.
Correct.
Otherwise, it couldn't be
Just-
postponed.
We're just shuffling it a
Yeah.
couple weeks.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, anything else?
Thank you for clarification.
Yes, no problem. Okay, I'll entertain the vote. Clerk, please call the roll.
Bates,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Frost, Gums,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Molina,
Melina, yes.
Strothman,
Yes.
Tepi,
Tepe, yes.
and Sanchez.
Yes. Okay, there's only one other discussion item. If you would all like to entertain, it's committee allocation ideas. This was postponed from the last meeting. And I believe Mr. Tepi said we need to talk about it at this meeting. Do you still feel that way, Mr. Tepi?
I have at least one item I would like to propose to discuss.
Okay, well, then we will open the discussion item for committee allocation ideas. If anyone needs to leave, I understand. Some stomachs might be grumbling. Kenyon, if you don't get a chance to adjourn, I'm sorry. We'll do it for you.
You guys can enjoy yourselves.
You don't know what you'll miss.
Just close my eyes and imagine.
You
We're
can
going
always
to
call in
allocate
on
all
Zoom
work.
or-
We're going to
Kenyon,
allocate all work to you, Mr. Kenyon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Call in on Zoom and not miss a moment.
One of the key things that has been discussed and actually approved by this committee is $4 million in mental health funds. But we haven't discussed any particular way to administer or distribute those funds. And what we heard last night at the meeting was a continuing litany, and I don't mean that to sound in a bad way, but continued reinforcement that one of the key things that is missing is money to keep employees in their job. Okay. And I know that some months ago, Mr. Sanchez and I had a discussion, and I've had several discussions with the health department in the fact that I believe the health department really does an extremely good job in understanding and working with these 501c3s, particularly those that are in the mental health field. And I'd like to propose a suggestion that we look at having the health department come up with a plan to utilize a large portion of these funds, okay, for employee retention. And I'd like to.
Mr. Tepe, are you referring to the $4 million program or just the ARPA funds in general?
The $4 million program, which
Okay.
we've approved.
Okay, continue, please.
Okay, because we wanted to have an initial shot across the bow, or so to speak, of ways to do it. So I'd like to get either approval or a consensus, and I will volunteer to work in depth with the health department if they are so inclined. Okay. And I believe one or two of them are online with us now. But to really look in depth at a more detailed plan to be presented as soon as possible in ways to utilize these funds for employee retention.
Thank you. And I will say, we conducted our first listening session, the one on behavioral and mental health last night. And tomorrow night, we have our second and final listening session on homeless shelters and food pantries. When those listening sessions are completed, all the information will be compiled, and there will be some internal discussions of how we might slice the pie and what that might look like. And those recommendations will then be given to this committee at the next meeting for the committee to do what they will with it. I will say that some of the internal conversations I've had with the health department would include their involvement in this process. So I will be sure to link you into that conversation as we go along towards the next meeting.
I'd actually like to jumpstart it and get some consensus that we could, we would entertain something like that so that, you know, they would feel comfortable investing more detailed time. And as I say, I'll volunteer to work with them.
The conversations I've had with Michael Isaacson in particular, there is a concept already fleshed out. There's not much more work that needs to be done, but we're waiting to gather all the data from the listening sessions and then provide recommendations to this committee. So it's kind of already, the groundwork has been done, but we just still have to go through the process. So at the next meeting, I'll make sure that you have input on what that looks like. Ms. Bates?
First of all, the $4 million is, I believe, supposed to be half for mental health and half for homeless and food security.
Sorry,
It
that
was
was
not-
that
it
was
was-
not discussed.
We haven't determined any proportions or ratios for the categories and how much will go to each. That will be discussed at the next meeting.
Okay, but it's still an open question.
It's an
whether
open question. We
it's
have
not-
3 categories that we're going to
It's not
consider.
all been, okay,
Yeah, and within those 3 categories, the decisions we really have to make are what parameters will we accept and allow in for this program.
okay. And second, do you mean employees of the health department or employees of the mental health nonprofits? Vern, Mr. Tepe, Mr. Tepe,
I'm sorry.
speaking. Do you mean employees of the health department only or employees of the nonprofit mental health services?
Well, let me repeat what I believe I said, and that is that the health department in particular already works in depth with these 501c3s.
Okay.
They know and understand many of the needs. And the objective would be to create a more detailed plan to come forth with the ability to use some of these funds to help the 501c3s in the mental health arena do an employee retention program.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else that would like to contribute to the conversation on committee member allocation ideas, and not really regarding the $4 million, but the program in general? Ms. Bates?
I would like to make sure that some of our smaller agencies get served as well as our larger agencies. Because I think that even the smaller agencies have a very important role to play in our communities.
And I think when this discussion item was proposed to me, it was the idea that some of us may already have some fleshed out ideas of how much money to put into the various buckets that we'll be spending. Like maybe we should only spend $30 million for internal requests, things like that. So that's
I
where
believe I said 20.
20 million.
Thanks.
That was the genesis of this discussion item. But if no one else has anything to add to this at this time, then we don't have old business or need for executive session, so I will entertain a motion to
Bates
adjourn
moves.
in a second. Bates moves.
Brown will second.
Brown seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Thank you all.